The last lead in the Richworth range that I always take along are back leads. Quite simply, ounce lead weights with a nice ring on with a split on. Obviously they're pretty straightforward in what you're trying to achieve with these. You slide them down your line, and the whole idea is to keep your line low in the water. It tends to sort of not spook the carp so much. Thank you very much, Richworth.
Well, pretty interesting stuff, Martin, and let me show you something else that might be of interest while I sit here and wait, hopefully, for a bite. Here's a little tip. Because the prepared mixers or floating trout pellets are soggy, you know what it's like, they don't last on the hair or on the hook very, very long. So all you got to do is get yourself a pop-up. Here's my dear old Tutti Frutti. And just shave it down to make it look, I've just cut the sides off, just make it look like a little bit of pellet. Now, of course, the beauty with this is that it will never go soggy because that'll last all day. The only time you'll ever lose that is possibly when you hook a fish. That's one little tip. This is a dual little tip as well. If you can, try this fulcrum method of attaching the bait to the hook. And when I say the fulcrum, you'll see the hair is coming off right halfway along the shank, and what happens, this makes the bait sit perfectly right on the surface, but look, it makes the hook sit perfectly sort of level as well. It's that all important 2 or 3 mil that can make the difference as a fish sucks it in. The rig or the bait and the hook become unbalanced in the mouth. As soon as he moves and feels that pressure of the hook link straightening, and of course the controller weight, that's it, it's all over and you've got a carp. So the fulcrum halfway along the shank, rig as I call, and the other one, just use a pop-up boilie, shave the sides off, make it look like a little bit of mixer. Manor Farm, one of my favourite out of the whole complex. It's historically Linear's sort of big fish water, but of course all the waters now have got big ones in. However, those big fish, those famous big fish, are still there. I've been lucky enough to capture a few myself. Certainly the random Linear is a fantastic fish. The birthmark Linear is another one. Pin scale's another. It goes on. And of course cuttail right up there on 40 pounds as well. So it is still very much a big fish water. Now in the summer, Brian Jarrett of Hinders Tackle, he came along and paid a visit, and we'll just have a look at Brian's approach on how to catch those manor fish.
Here we are at Richworth Linear Manor Farm. This is what they call the road bank. You can probably hear, or you will hear, the traffic coming along the road behind us. The lake's between 12 and 14 acres in size. You've got a good stock of doubles, an awful lot of 20s, and then the pick of the lot, the 8 different 30s, which regularly come out the complex, with the key fish being cuttail, which does go over 40 pounds. Tends to be a little bit more difficult than the other lakes on the complex, but certainly a very interesting gravel pit. You've got a huge amount of features. You've got various gravel bars and silt areas. There's a main bar running from peg 1 about 40 yards along here at 70 yards range, where the fish do tend to run backwards and forwards, up and down. One certain good piece of advice on this particular pit is the time that you actually turn up to fish your session. First light in the morning, you always do get a good showing, and generally you do tend to see one of the bigger fish stick its head up around that time in the morning. Also around 6 o'clock in the evening they tend to start showing a bit. So a good pair of Polaroids, pair of binoculars if you got them, you know, anything to help you to spot those fish. They do bubble a fair bit, and at times it can look just like a few roach feeding. In real terms there's a couple of 3 big carp led underneath, they're feeding away. So any little sign you're looking for on the pit, as well as obviously the key sign of the fish coming out and crashing down. Okay, what we're going to do is have a look at some of the ways that I've approached the water. Although there's loads of different styles that does produce on this lake, I'm going to show you 3 or 4 different ideas that I use on here, and some of the little edges that I put into practice, hopefully to put some of the bigger fish on the bank. So let's go and have a look at some of the rigs and baits. Okay, let's talk about some of the baits that we're using on Manor. First one being the boilie. Richworth Tutti Frutti. It's been on the market now since 1981-82. I think it was the first time I ever used one. It was the first purpose-made boilie to come on the market, which was a real revolution at the time. They've caught hundreds of thousands of carp over the years. It really is a very, very sweet, very distinctive flavour. And the bait itself just keeps going and going. A very good winter bait, but it's one that I tend to use quite often in a spod mix broken down, just to add that extra bit of attraction into the mix. If you notice within the bag there, you've got all the juices starting to come out of the bait. What I do with Richworth, I'll take them out of the freezer about 24 to 48 hours before I'm going to use them, and I actually sit them in front of a window with the sun coming onto them and get them as hot as I possibly can. What tends to happen then is all the juices and the sweeteners start to come out the bait, and they go very, very sticky. And it's in this sticky form that Richworth are certainly at their best. I don't know that many other baits that get better with time, but certainly the Richworth Tutti is one that as soon as that juice and the stickiness starts to come out, they attract fish like mad. Even the very big fish. Very commonly used boilie. Now what we do is have a look at the bits and pieces that I use in the spod mix. First thing we got is an assortment of different trout pellets, various different sizes of pellets. What I tend to do is pre-mix them together so that all the oils and the taste from the different pellets mix in together. Also with the different sizes in the pellets, it makes sure that your breakdown time actually out in the lake is completely different from one pellet to the next, so you've always got some solid pellets there as well as some bits that are already broken down to nothing. They go in there first. Right, what we're going to add in next is this assortment of product. What we got here is various different fish meals, various different ground particles, loads of little tiny particles of food. A few more pellets into there just to add a bit more taste. We'll just put a few handfuls of that one in there. Just give those two a mix in first of all. Next comes the maize. Extremely good attractor. The fish do love the taste for it, but I don't tend to put too much of the maize in. Just a little bit of maize, but then make sure you get a decent amount of the juice. There's so much taste from these particles in the juice. Then hemp seed, another one that they do love. They do love the hemp seed on manna. But again, just a small sprinkling of the hemp seed in there, and then plenty of juice. So with all these liquid attractors, what we're doing is putting loads of taste and smell into the area that we're fishing without the actual food content to fill the fish up. A few tiger nuts, literally about a dozen tigers. That's plenty enough for a spod mix. Tigers do tend to fill them up quite quickly. I mean, extremely good attractor of carp, but they don't generally tend to eat too many of them. If you're using chopped tigers, you can get away with a fair amount more. And again with the tiger juice, nice bit of the tiger juice, nice and sticky and sweet, that one. Back to the sweet corn, a little bit of sweet corn, even some of the bigger fish. I mean, certainly cuttail, one of the biggest residents of Manor Lake, does love sweet corn and maize, and quite often does get caught on it. So we'll just give that a bit of a mix in. Now this one, what we've got here is an assortment of crushed peanut and crushed hemp. I think peanut is probably one of the best of all particles, nuts, pulses, anything you want to combine together in that. It certainly attracts loads of carp, and it's caught me many carp over the years. But what I tend to do now is I crush both of them down together so that all the oils are mixing in together there, and it's creating something which is a little bit different in taste. The other good thing about this, it does tend to hold the spod mix together with it, so that you can use higher amounts of liquid from the particle, and stops it, or obviously any spill coming out the back of the spod when spodding. So we just mix that lot in there first of all. Now back to the boilies, back to the tooties, and what I do with these, lovely and sticky, is just squeeze them between my fingers and just break them up a bit so that the inside of the boilie is open, and obviously a lot more attractions coming through it. Obviously when a boiled bait is boiled, it does put quite a hard skin around the outside and slows the flavour coming down. And what we're trying to do with this mix is to put as many different colours and variations of tastes all in together, and get the carp onto it as quickly as possible. So just break a few of those up in there. And then last but not least, just a few fish meal boilies.